It's not just any old changes in the brain, though, that have made human beings what they are today. The ability to think, the ability to reason, I mean, obviously that's a big deal. But there are other kinds of changes that have been tremendously important for the success of our species, and that really define who we are as a species and, frankly, just as humans. Social interactions are thought to generate strong selection for the ability to handle lots of information. Um, in order to do well, or in order to navigate the complexities of a large society of individuals, you have to remember who individuals are. You have to be able to get inside their head and think about what they want. You have to be able to strategize, maybe play some individuals off against one another, realize which individuals you have dominance over, which individuals you don't, how to treat the ones that you don't have dominance over, how to win the favor of those individuals, how maybe to intimidate the ones that you're socially, that you're above them in the social hierarchy. I mean, it gets very complicated. What we're basically talking about is politics, and politics plays a really big role in a lot of primate societies. Primates, like these gelada monkeys in Ethiopia, often live in very large groups. And when you get these large groups, you have the potential for a lot of very complicated social interactions. Those social interactions in primate groups are a major determinant of their fitness. So, for example, in baboons, the number of offspring that a female is able to rear largely a function of how high she is in the social hierarchy. Because she calls in favors basically from subordinates who then provide her with things like food, they care for her offspring, and so on. So that her ability to get her genes into future generations is heavily impacted by her ability to navigate the complexities of society. One cognitive ability that for a very long time we thought was unique to human beings was what's called the theory of mind. The theory of mind refers to the fact that you as a human being can kind of put yourself in the place of another human being. You can think about what they know and do not know. Basically, what is their perspective on the world. There are not very many other animals besides humans that can do this, but some of the other primates can. And what's shown here is a very clever experiment which set out to show whether or not chimpanzees have a theory of mind. And they found that, in fact, yes, there's compelling evidence that they do. It's a little complicated, but let me walk you through it. What the researchers did was they placed a fake snake out in an area where they knew that chimpanzees from a particular troop would encounter it. Now, there are lots of deadly snakes in Africa, and so when a chimpanzee comes on one of these snakes, it'll give a warning call to alert others nearby that a potential threat has been spotted. And the researchers didn't bother recording any data on that. What they did record data on is what happened subsequently. So the individual that gave the warning color, the sentry, we'll call that individual, is in the vicinity of the snake. And then other chimpanzees come up to where the sentry is standing. Well, sentries behave very differently when these other individuals come up, depending on what they've seen those other individuals do. So, for example, if this sentry sees the new arrivals look at the snake, it doesn't bother giving another warning call. Essentially, the inference here is that the sentry is aware that the other chimpanzees have seen the snake and that it doesn't need to call a second time. Similarly, if the sentry knows that the other chimpanzees that are now showing up were within earshot when the first warning call was made, it doesn't bother giving a second one because obviously they know. But if when those other chimpanzees show up, the sentry does not see them see the snake and does not know that they were within earshot when the first warning call was given, then it will call again because there is the possibility that those members of the troop have not yet been alerted. So what's happening, and basically what you're showing with this experiment, is you're showing that one individual, one animal within the group, can kind of store in its mind a sense of what each of the other individuals in the troop know and do not know. And of course, that's tremendously important if you're trying to navigate a complex social environment. Having said that some other primates have really pretty complex social environments, and they have some of the same cognitive capacities that human beings do with respect to those social environments, human beings are way ahead of any other primate with respect to social skills. Even small children can successfully navigate social puzzles much more successfully than even chimpanzees can. So I won't go into the details on this, but researchers basically tested small children, chimpanzees, and orangutans on a set of tasks, some of which were just physical tasks, and they found they all did equally well, but some of which involved social cognition. And even young human beings completely outpace the cleverest of primates, of the other primates rather, in their ability to deal with social situations. The capacity for language is not, as we also used to think, unique to human beings. A number of different species use symbolic language, even some insects. You may be familiar with the dance of the honeybee, which tells other foragers which direction to go in order to find good pollen and nectar, and how far to fly to get there. It's a very clever way of communicating information, and it is entirely symbolic in a way that really very few other animals use language. There are a number of other primates, however, that do use language in some way. So, for example, the vervet monkey gives very different alarm calls when it sees different threats. When a vervet monkey sees an eagle up in the sky, it'll give one alarm call that means get under cover. When it sees a leopard, it'll give a second alarm call, which means get up in a tree. And if it sees a snake, it'll give a third alarm call, which means stand up tall, back away, make sure that you can see the ground. This is a language with 3 words, and while that might seem trivial, it's a lot better than most species can do. The same area of the brain that activates in vervet monkeys when they hear the alarm call of a vervet monkey, signaling there's a snake or a leopard or an eagle, that area of the brain is the same one that is involved in the processing of language in human beings. The big difference is that this area is in human beings connected to many, many more brain regions. There are a tremendous number of linkages between the arcuate fasciculus in the human brain and the same region in chimpanzees or macaques or any other of the primates. So, and this is something that I kind of want to emphasize. What's going on with human beings is that we've basically got the same stuff. It's just that certain aspects of it have been greatly elaborated. We're basically working with the same set of tools that any primate has, but in us, some of the tools have been greatly enlarged and made more complicated. This is true not only with our cognitive capacities, but with our emotions. The emotions that you feel are related very closely to chemical transmitters that are found in your brain. And that biochemical framework, the biochemical framework that basically causes you to have emotional reactions, is present in all mammals. It's the same chemicals in all of them. So for example, the amygdala is a part of the brain that is involved in the fear response. And it's involved in the fear response in basically all mammals. The fear response that you have when you see what seems to be a deadly snake is very similar and triggers the same kind of reactions that you might have in any other mammal that has evolved in the presence of this kind of threat. The problem with the fear response that the amygdala generates in us is that the things that we fear today are not like the things that we evolved to fear. The fight or flight response to stress is one that you've probably heard of before. And essentially what it does is it gets you ready for a physical threat. What it tends to do is it makes your muscles very quick to react. The heart gets going so it can deliver energy to those muscles. The lungs start moving so they can deliver oxygen to those muscles. Everything is getting you ready for a physical fight with some threat, or maybe just running away from it. Okay? In the rest of the body system, things like the digestive system and so forth, those systems are shut down because they use energy and other resources that you really can't afford to be using right now, because you might have to run for your life. This is very good if the threat that you're encountering is, say, there's a deadly snake, I need to go away from it right now, or there's an attacking member of another troop of primates, I need to fight back. However, the situation in which we find ourselves today is not like the situation in which this fear response evolved. What human beings experience now is, rather than a quick physical threat that is very quickly over, what we experience are these sort of very long-term stressors. And the fight or flight response is a very poor response to this, because it shuts down certain systems that are actually very useful to us. And if you stay in the fight or flight response for very long, if you stay in that mode for very long, it will start hurting your body. So this is one of these cases where human beings clearly evolved in one setting to deal with a certain set of evolutionary pressures. And yet the system of responses that we evolved for dealing with those pressures serves us very badly today, because the context has really changed. The biochemicals involved in good feelings other than fear, are also shared between us and all of the mammals. Dopamine and serotonin are the neurochemicals that are most closely related with pleasure and satisfaction. And dopamine, while it is a very pleasant thing to experience, can also form the basis for addictions. So for example, the dopamine transporter is a molecule that is blocked by cocaine molecules. The reason that cocaine is so addictive is that it ramps up the amount of dopamine that is in the synapses in your brain. And so you're experiencing this tremendous basically surge of pleasure messages while you're on cocaine. Certain experiences in our society, like, so for example, gambling or many video games, have been designed so that they cause dopamine bursts. So that they trigger dopamine bursts in your brain. And that's why they are addictive, is because you're getting this rush of this particular neurotransmitter. Now again, these are the sort of things that our brains were not evolved really to deal with. These are very recent difficulties, or if you want to call them challenges, and evolutionary challenges, that the system of neurotransmitters that we experience emotions through were not evolved to actually handle. Oxytocin and vasopressin are another couple of neurotransmitters, again shared by all mammals, but these play special roles in our social interactions. So oxytocin release is very much related to your feelings of trust and closeness with other individuals, and the way that many mammal species are sort of wired is they respond to oxytocin in a way that causes them to develop and nurture closer relationships with other individuals. There's this positive feedback loop involved. I get a surge of oxytocin, and I respond in a way that makes you feel close to me, then you respond in a way that makes me feel close to you, and we both get a lot of oxytocin out of it. And that's how bonding happens between two individuals. If you experimentally apply oxytocin to people during psychological studies, you can cause them to trust other people more. You can also cause them to do things like forgive more or feel more empathetic towards other individuals. Vasopressin also has an important role to play in interpersonal reactions and interpersonal interactions. Particularly interesting and maybe disturbing finding is that there's a certain allele for a vasopressin receptor. Okay, so the receptor for this particular neurotransmitter, that if you have two copies of this, you are much more likely to have problems in your relationships. Individuals with two copies of this allele, which is called the 334 allele, are much more likely to have divorce or a threat of divorce within a particular time frame in a relationship, and they're much less likely to be married than individuals who have no or one copy of that allele.